Welcome to a new kind of episode of Andy Takes That Chance. In this episode, we'll be mixing illustration by Tom Bradshaw, narration by me, Matt Shaw, and Brady Frost, fan opinion and media interviews as we analyse Huddersfield Town's decision to part with the Cowley Brothers and bring in Carlos Corberan, a move which came as a shock to those outside of our corner of West Yorkshire. This isn't the first time Huddersfield Town have caused a stir in the national media with their removal of a manager. In 2012, then chairman and owner Dean Hoyle faced a media backlash and criticism from several high-profile figures in the game, including England striker Wayne Rooney, for his removal of Lee Clark. Clark had just overseen Town's third defeat in their last 55 league games. Hoyle's decision was quickly vindicated though, as new manager Simon Grayson immediately led Town to promotion into the Championship, a feat that looked like eluding Lee Clark for a third successive season. Town and Hoyle then created another media ruction on the 4th of November 2015 when removing manager Chris Powell. Powell was very well liked within media circles and had guided Huddersfield Town to a finishing position of 16th in May, a position which had been Town's highest in the football pyramid for 15 years. Powell was removed from his post 6 months later after a creditable draw away at Reading, with Town 18th in the Championship, a position which was par score with the outside world's perception of the Terriers. But this perception was part of the problem. Then Town CEO Nigel Clibbins said in a statement upon Powell's removal that it is made with the long-term interests of the club in mind. It signals a change of direction by the club and a new approach. The managerial change was in truth no slight on Chris Powell's managerial ability, but the Huddersfield board knew that it would take something radical to break into the top half of the Championship. In came a head coach in David Wagner, whose charisma, tactical acumen and success has created a blueprint for possibly this and several future managerial appointments. We fast forward to the season gone, and when the Wagner blueprint failed with Jan Sievert, the new owner Phil Hodgkinson deviated and appointed Danny and Nicky Cowley. The Cowleys only agreed to the move from Lincoln if the title involved was manager and not head coach, which presumably allowed the brothers greater autonomy over decision making behind the scenes, such as areas like player recruitment. The Cowleys joined Huddersfield Town on the 9th of September, with the Terriers on 1 point after their first 7 games and out of the League Cup thanks to a Cowley-inspired Lincoln. So when Emil Smith-Rowe secured Town's second-tier status in a 2-1 win over eventual automatic promotion winners West Brom, it created far more consternation when Town departed with another managerial team that was seen by those outside of the club as doing a good job. However, unlike with the sackings of Lee Clark and Chris Powell, which were mostly met with agreement in the Huddersfield Town fan base, the decision to sack the Cowleys caused far more friction. We asked some Huddersfield fans and media personnel for their reaction to the decision to remove the Cowleys from post.
I suppose, I mean, like you say, you're looking on from where I am. I did a game for Radio Leeds at the start of the season. Lincoln played, we saw what Lincoln did over the last couple of seasons. They looked a decent team. And when I saw them come to Town and outplay a decent Town side at the time, you felt these people know what they're doing. They had a good team. And then the next minute you find out that they're going to be managers of Huddersfield Town. I was actually quite excited. I thought, these two up-and-coming young coaches, the way Lincoln played football was how I like to see it being played. It was fast, it was on the ground, but it was fast and direct. And you kind of thought, well, that's perfect for Town, it's what they need, a bit of excitement. And so I was happy when they got the job. I thought, this is a really, really good appointment, very astute, I'm sure there wasn't just Huddersfield Town looking at these two at the time. So yeah, at the time, I was quite excited. I thought this is going to be a good thing for Town, and it just didn't work out, did it? They didn't. I don't know if they really got. Only Town fans really would answer it, and you've got to be sensible. It wasn't their team when they took over. It wasn't their team. They made a few additions, and I just honestly thought that they would get this summer, especially keeping them up. To rebuild in their way, but it just I speak to people at Town constantly, and they're not too upset that the Cowleys have gone. So, who am I?
Well, yeah, we'd heard rumours, I'll be honest, and but we'd sort of run those by our sources. There were two occasions in the build-up to the Cowleys being sacked where we ran things by our sources and said, is this accurate? And they came back and said, no, absolutely not. But obviously, sort of in hindsight, that there were signs that were there from other things that were sort of going on, and we didn't ignore the warning signs. We sort of did our due diligence on them, and as I say, we ran everything by people who who we trust and who have generally been good sources of information, and they were saying no. So I think it was. There were a couple of things, without going into huge details, that made us think things aren't entirely happy there. But then it always kind of feels like that when you're not getting the results. And I think that sort of that bit after the break, it was like there's obviously issues, but it doesn't feel like anything that wouldn't be or couldn't be sorted. Once they get a couple of wins. And I think that's how everyone felt after the West Brom game as well, because people were criticising the Cowleys after some of the games. Not they weren't calling for their heads or anything, but they were getting criticism. But then after the West Brom game, everyone was like, cracking, we'll look to next season. These guys are going to take us forward. And I don't think it's any secret that I shared that view. So it was a big surprise. But then at the same time, I think everyone has then, for as much as everyone was outraged about the Cowleys, they've then been very excited about the appointment of Carlos Corberan. And those two things aren't necessarily contradictory to one another. It's possible to be both.
I felt the Cowleys did a good job in their time at Huddersfield Town. As good a job as could have been expected, given the situation they inherited and the facts, presumably at least our playing squad was well over budget, and the transfer window had more or less or had come to a conclusion by that time. I think they set out and achieved what they would have wanted to achieve at the outset, which was keeping Huddersfield Town in the Championship. The one disappointment for me probably was the style of football that we played. It wasn't particularly pleasing on the eye, and I certainly wouldn't have wanted to watch a full season of that this year ahead. But I felt they deserved the opportunity to try and play a better brand of football and bring in some signings that would fit their approach and their kind of ideology. I think the reason why I say disappointed rather than surprised is I think kind of at the time, as the season came to a close, it definitely felt like there was some discontent kind of brewing behind the scenes. And two things obviously spring to mind for me. One would be the way the Danny Simpson contract situation was handled. I think in a post-match press conference, Danny Cowley overtly said he would have liked Danny Simpson to remain at the club and saw him finishing the season with Huddersfield Town. And contrary to what he wanted, the club made the decision to not offer Danny Simpson a short extension to the end of the season. And I think the way that came out and played out a little bit in public suggested that perhaps Danny Cowley, Nicky Cowley and the powers that be were no longer on the same page. And then the second one was a John Goran Stankovic situation. I think I heard a few things kind of subsequently that perhaps suggest certain things were either exaggerated or perhaps not quite the truth, but a little bit similar really. Kind of John was announced that he was going to leave the club, wasn't to be offered a new deal. And again, Danny Cowley said he would have liked him to stay and feature in his plans. And albeit kind of in isolation, two quite small things, kind of when you start adding these things together, you kind of sense that perhaps all things aren't quite as rosy as what they maybe once were at the outset.
My initial reaction was I was surprised but not shocked, because as we all know, football is a crazy place. These things happen all the time. I've told people before, I remember sitting on the sofa when me and the wife were just newly together in Hull, when I was playing Hull City, reading the back of the Hull Daily Mail. Brian Little is my man. Brian Little is the future of this club. That was Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, Brian Little was looking for a new job. So yeah, it happens all the time, and I've been in football a long time. I thought after the West Bromwich Albion game, they might be given a chance, because that was an unbelievable result as well as performance. Surprised? No, because then I tried to give my head a little shake and realised some of the football I have actually watched, and some of the sideline behaviour I've seen as well over the time of the Cowleys, and I just thought, bringing all that together, yeah, I don't think the chairman's going to be happy. As you say, the fans were 50-50 when they got sacked. So, no, it's time to move on.
I would say that I was very shocked, to be honest. Initially, a Brighton fan actually messaged me and just said, what's this about the Cowleys being sacked? And I thought it was a joke. I thought he was just having me on. Because from my point of view, I was thinking, they're quite really desirable managers to have, especially in the Championship. Guys that are probably at the forefront of really sort of English management, really. So I think it was big surprise. Probably more of a shock, and it took a while to sink in.
Initially, obviously, there was a lot of shock. We knew there were rumblings that things weren't quite right behind the scenes, but we also got sort of fairly categoric denials from the club when asked about anything to do with that. I think that the way it was done, a lot of people will question it. I think with what unfolded afterwards, it's sort of obvious to see why it was done as it was, because they had someone lined up. They wanted to get moving. They wanted to get things in place as quickly as they possibly could. But I think there was just that initial shockwave, because you've literally, 36 hours before they beat West Brom and essentially saved the season and kept them up from that position of 2 points after 9 games. That's just an incredible achievement, really, as good as anyone achieved anything in that division. So yeah, it's still a bit of a shock, but it is understandable. If a football club wants to go in a different direction, that's what they have to do.
Obviously, the timing of it straight after West Brom was probably the biggest shock of all, in regards to them going to just beat West Brom, who were up there fighting for promotion. So the timing of it were a shock more than all else, more than the actual sacking, really.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I think I certainly aren't. I've lived through enough town sackings not to be surprised by anything, but also not to make a judgment on it early. I think we've all lived through, or most of us have lived through sort of the furore about Lee Clark getting sacked and the media going, "Oh my God, he went 473 games in a row without unbeaten. Why have you sacked him?" And then it turned out to be a great decision. And I think Town have made great decisions. The couple have gone wrong. Obviously, Jan Sievert was a terrible decision, but over the last 10 years, we've made a series of decent decisions that are sometimes quite short-termist. And I think the Cowleys coming in was quite short-termist. And then this feels more like you might be at the start of a project. I think that's the exciting thing. It's that kind of, we don't really know. There's something about the thrill of the new, isn't there? And the thrill of the unknown, that you kind of, we don't know much about this guy. But if he's connected to Bielsa, then, and suddenly there's question marks. Whereas before, I think I wasn't excited about the new season of the Cowleys, and I'm far more excited about this.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I'm not in Huddersfield. So usually when you're in a place and you're in amongst fans, you get an idea of where something's going. The fans aren't stupid. They kind of I think they have an idea or an inkling or certainly what they would like. So maybe they knew something was going on. I don't know. I didn't. When I saw the news, I literally got on the phone to one of my mates and said, "What's going on there? Are they going elsewhere? Have they been poached?" And he said, "No, they're just the boards." But the rumours coming out the club were that they just weren't happy with what the Cowleys were, where they wanted to go. So it happens. It happens in football, and a decision was made. It was a swift one, so clearly the chairman, he hasn't refrained from making a decision, which is, credit to him. If it's something ultimately decisions are down to him, and if he's not happy with what he's got, then he has to make a decision, and he's done it quickly. So you've got to back him, and hopefully he's made the right decision.
I've always suggested that it were more of an off the field decision rather than an on the field decision. I think if from rumours that have been circulating, if a relationship breaks down between a board or a chairman and the manager of the actual first team, then if it's not fixable or it's not workable, then long term it is probably best that they're part of the ways, and for him to come out and actually sack him rather than it kind of being the usual mutual consent. Shows that there must have been some disagreement there. If the ethos or the vision has changed from when they first came in, for me the main question there has got to be asked as to how that happened. Why has it changed so quickly? The noise before Cowley came in seemed to be that Phil Hodgkinson really wanted him. Apparently, they turned us down originally. I think there was something to do with rather being a head coach, they wanted to be a manager. Obviously, Phil's gone back and changed them there. Has he now, gone back on things that he originally said they would have control over? Did he make it abundantly clear what they could and couldn't get involved in, or is it a case of Cowley's knew that and then overstepped the mark? I guess it's probably something that we'll never know. I don't think either side will gain out by getting into a public slanging match. He said this, we did that, etc., etc. So I don't know. I think it is probably best that the part of the ways now, rather than getting halfway through another season maybe and then having to do it then.
Yes, I just speaking for myself, who actually gets paid to watch Huddersfield Town games, it was actually painful at times to watch. I didn't see a progression. I saw it every 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 games. I saw a West Brom, but then I saw just back to the old days of backwards and sideways and managers who have gone by in the past without, the standard of player that Huddersfield Town had in the squad right now. I thought that squad was better in not just getting results, but the way they played on the field than was brought to us.
Personally, I think it was. I don't think it was the right decision. I think that I understand the idea of having a more strict identity, but I think that there was certainly signs that Danny Cowley was, and they were trying to carve that out in that 4-2-3-1. I think there were games against Bristol City, Charlton, and even like Fulham as well, where you start to see this more attacking style come through. I think that when you're in a relegation battle, that you just simply play the way you play to get the points. You don't sort of, it doesn't really matter whether it's silky football at all times. At the end of the day, you just have to get the points on the board. And I think that ultimately it's a very harsh criticism to level at the Cowleys to say that that the football wasn't always the most attacking, because they needed to get the points on the board given the way that they came in as well, with 1 point after 8 games or whatever it was after Jan. So I don't think it was the right decision. I understand why there's a need to sort of start fresh, but you could argue that the Cowleys were already kind of doing that, and that they'd already begun to install their mentality and also bring in their style of players, really. Especially, I think that all the fans and actually the club were very happy with the recruitment in January that was, as I understand it, very Cowley-led. So it seems strange that they did now backtrack on that, and I think that something significant probably changed in the interim.
No. I'm not saying I would have kept the Cowleys there for the next 10 years or more or anything like that, but I think you have to understand that I've said it on the Examiner pod, I'm not sure what percentage of football managers out there could have done what the Cowleys did with Huddersfield Town this season, which is keep them up from that position, navigate their way through the injury crisis, get the players in January who made the difference, navigate the lockdown and come back. And the thing is, when when you look back at that period after lockdown, all anybody ever sees is, oh, we didn't score any goals and we played awful football, etc. If you look at Town's record in that mini league, it was actually, compared to those around them, compared to that sort of, bottom 10 really, Town's record was pretty damn good. So, yeah, I think the thing about the Cowleys is they're results-driven managers. I don't buy into what some people say, which is that it's all about them and it's a brand. I don't buy into that at all. They are just completely driven. They have a job of work. They're obsessed. They're workaholics. They want to get in, do what needs to be done. And they will, horses for courses, they will get that win. And I honestly thought that Town would want that for next season. After a promotion seasons, which was great, but they are weird. After a first season in the Premier League, which was great to stay up, but weird because everything's new. After an awful weird season to come back down, and after another weird season, first season back in the Championship, I thought Town would settle for some normality for a year. And I think the Cowleys, I think you'd probably agree, Matt, would probably have them in that sort of block between 10th and 16th fairly comfortably next season with even with a sort of minimal investment. So it's quite a lot to throw that away on a gamble, but at the same time it could be, gambles sometimes come off. Gambles can be your biggest wins.
Ultimately, if there was a breakdown in trust, in communication, and a misalignment in what the direction the club was going in between the powers that be, Phil Hodgkinson, Lee Bromby, etc., and the management team, Danny, Nicky, Cowley. If those two kind of sets of groups and stakeholders were on very different paths, then it probably was the right decision for them to part ways at that particular time, because it's very unlikely, I think, when you've got an important transfer window and you're trying to do different things, that you'll be able to find some common ground and have some success. And in that, it's been very, very difficult to come back together. So probably was the right decision in that sense.
Again, I'm not there. I don't know what's going on. My feeling is that something must have gone on in the background, whether it's a clash of personalities or you hear rumours of they've asked for this and that, and the club can't give them that, and then maybe been a fallout. I really don't know. I personally, I think clearly there's been a clash of personalities, and they've decided to be, a parting of the ways, and decision made, and Town move on.
No, if anything, I'm slightly more excited. I think just reading around what Corberan wants to do and sort of the thinking behind it. I think I'm more on board with it. Certainly, I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? Cowleys did a great job in keeping us up. But looking forward, could I see anything other than mid-table under them? Probably not. But now this feels like it is that sort of feeling of, well, it could be absolutely brilliant or it could be an absolute disaster. And actually, as a fan, that's great fun, especially as a fan of a sort of middling championship club. You don't have that kind of, who wants to go into the season thinking, oh, will we finish 13th or 17th? No, there's nothing exciting about that. We could finish second, or we could finish 22nd now. That's exciting.
I think I've sort of cooled on it a little bit. I think there's certain elements of Corberan's new sort of regime that are quite exciting, and the introduction of the young players is something that all Huddersfield Town fans like to see, I think. And it is nice to know that there is going to be a more identity coming in from day one. But I think, it's something we've definitely called on. But having said that, I think it just does put a little bit of pressure on the new team, really. And I think that Corberan still needs to bring in his sort of players. And I know this is something that might come on to, but I think he's going to take a while for him to implement his style on the squad. And I think that you could argue that Cowley was sort of starting to get there with the way he was implementing his style on it. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. It's something I have called on, though.
I was never at the point where I was sort of apoplectic or I was, kicking off on Twitter or anything like that. I think it's that thing of being a sort of heavily invested neutral and an analyst looking at this club. And I think at football in general, I think if you have people who want to go in a different direction, if you have a chairman and a director of football and a CEO, etc., who all have a vision and the managers don't fit in that vision, then you have to change. You have to commit. The thing this club needs more than anything else is a blueprint, is a commitment to something. Because David Wagner came in, wanted to change everything, but you were never supposed to go up in that season. You did go up. You were never supposed to stay up. You did stay up, and then it sort of all come crashing down over a couple of seasons. What the club really needs is a reset, is a do-over. And yeah, it's difficult to sort of say, well, it's definitely going to be a success or anything like that, because anybody who tells you it's definitely is overwhelmingly positive about it, and anybody who's overwhelmingly negative about it shouldn't be trusted, because nobody knows. But I think that it's not a case of changing the mind or understanding the sacking or anything like that. It's more a case of, okay, well, if this is what you're going to do, you've got to do it. You've got to back it up by staying true to it. You've got to put a bit of investment in. You've got to get the right players in the right positions. You've got to back Carlos with his coaching staff that he needs, and you have to put the foundations in place to support this massive change you've made. And at the moment, we don't know if they are all going to be in place, but early signs are that everybody is committed to this. Everybody is going for it. So yeah, you have to, sometimes you never know if the next thing is going to be the best thing. That's the thing.
No, not particularly. No, like I just sort of said, I think it were always more of an off the field decision than an on the field decision. I don't really feel passionate either way. I'm not sort of Cowley should have definitely stayed or Cowley should have definitely sacked. They came in, they did a job that they needed, what they were tasked to do. They've done it, and whatever happened, and they've now gone. Probably best just to move on and rather than trying to analyse every iota of that decision, just to move on and get behind new guy.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's because when they came in, I was excited for Town. I thought this is going to be a really good appointment. It didn't work out. They've gone, and you're thinking, what's these are two up and coming young managers with everything to play for. I was a little bit disappointed, but then when the appointment of Corberan comes along, you think, there's maybe a bit of method to the madness here, because this guy is qualified to the hilt. He's got good experience. He's worked under one of the best coaches in the world. He's a trusted lieutenant of his, Marcelo Bielsa's, and suddenly things fall into place, and you think, this could be inspired. And I get the feeling from certainly friends at Town that they're over the moon with the appointment of Corberan. So all's well that ends well, and like you say, you move on.
No, steadfast. As I was on the last game at Millwall, I'm looking forward to it. I've spoken to people about Carlos Corberan as well, and people from inside Leeds, from Huddersfield Town. I know how he's hit the ground running with his training methods, the way he's going to do things. Very Bielsa, let's say, because it's a style of play which I think is exciting. Town fans aren't always going to like it, but Leeds have been fantastic for 2 years. And if we can get a slice of that and we can watch that product, and we have this young, exciting group of people who want to press, who want, to leave nothing to chance tactically, get these players whipped into shape with high energy, high everything, then no, I'm looking forward to it. And as soon as it was announced, I was looking forward to it.
Time will tell. Time will tell if it proves to be the right decision. I think looking ahead, I'm expecting Huddersfield Town to play much better, more attractive, more free-flowing style of football than what we've been privy to in the last, particularly few weeks, but kind of in the last few months as well. So in that sense, as a fan, that excites me, and that's kind of what I want to watch, and that's what I pay my money to see ultimately. I think on one hand, we've got a much greater likelihood or greater potential for success. I think on the other hand, we've got a much greater potential for failure as well. So I kind of always felt while Danny Cowley and Nicky Cowley were in charge going into season ahead, we would have done okay. We would have been a okay team in the Championship. I think we wouldn't have been involved in a relegation battle. But did I have the confidence in them to really push us to the next level? Play that good football I mentioned previously, and also kind of challenge towards the top half of the table and the playoff spots ultimately. Not so sure.
My position's kind of softened on it. I can understand where the club are coming from, and to be honest, I think there were, if either party felt it wasn't working out, then it was the right thing to do, because although it's sort of a weird time to make a change, this is a squad that sort of desperately needs to be rebuilt, and I think I can understand the feeling that there is no point if you've not got 100% faith in the manager, there is no point in giving them another year to build the squad in their own image and then have to undo it again in a year's time. So I sort of understand the change a bit more than perhaps I initially did. I still think it was a massive gamble, and I still think there is an argument that it was a completely unnecessary gamble. But you've got to reserve judgment, and we can't just we can't go into the new season just going, oh well, they shouldn't have got rid of the Cowleys, because it's done now. We can't just spend the whole of the new season going, well, this wouldn't have happened under the Cowleys. It's pointless. And even just speaking as a neutral, even if that was true, it's not a very exciting story to tell, is it? Yeah. We've got to sort of look forward and deal with the fact that we've got a new head coach now who, as I say, looks like he could be very exciting. And, with a bit of luck, in a year's time, when not even thinking about the Cowleys at all, it'll be like, oh yeah, those guys, respectfully to them. But that in a year's time, that would be the ideal situation, is like, oh yeah, remember the Cowleys.
With town fans divided on the sacking, supporters looked to the Huddersfield Board of Directors for governance and to provide a clear path ahead before rumours started to circle. Town released a statement via the club's official website with one particular highlight. We have made this decision in the belief that, in the long term, it is in the best interests of the club as we move forward. We have a different vision for the way that we operate the club and how our ambitions can be achieved. The club are not seeking applications for the vacant position. Whereas the statement did not alleviate the rumour mill from turning, it did offer a small insight into why the Cowley brothers had been relieved of their position, and the line about how the club were not seeking applications indicated that the new man was already en route. The town board would then subsequently stay silent until after the final game of the season at Millwall, where former town favourite Danny Schofield took charge. On the 23rd of July, Huddersfield Town officially announced Carlos Corberan as their new head coach, and with it some details as to the thinking behind the change, courtesy of Head of Football Operations Lee Bromby. There seemed to be three main points that he, and then later CEO Mark Devlin, would continuously drive home, and from here, Brady Frost will pick up the story.
Thanks, Matt. So here's the three main points. The first point was the need for a head coach. After the Cowleys' dismissal, the main rumour around the decision to part ways was down to a disagreement over transfers. That, and who and what would handle specifics at the club. Lee Bromby may have been referring to that rumour in some of his recent comments. He said, quote, "After 2 difficult seasons, we've put a lot of thought and work into what we want to be and how we operate moving forward. Obviously, we need to return to winning games, and to be successful, we must have all areas of the club aligned in the way we work." Point 2. Create an identity. This isn't the first time Town have tried to create an identity and a style of play. It was first attempted with Mark Robins in the 2013-14 season, a fluid system which played out from the back with rotating number 6s. However, without the correct personnel, this fell flat. partly down to Robin's persistence in using Peter Clark and Anthony Gerrard, two old-fashioned centre-backs, meant this was always doomed to fail. The second time the club tried to create an identity was in 2015. Stuart Webber, who was then the head of football operations at the time, chose the German gegenpressing model for Huddersfield. Why? His reasoning was that this was the style that Town fans wanted to see. Hard work, fitness and pressing. In came David Wagner and, well, you know the rest. Town's best period for 45 years. So, it's only natural that the club wanted to recapture success under Wagner. Here's what Bromby said when they appointed Corberan. Quote, Carlos was our ideal candidate for our new head coach from the outset, as his idea of football is completely aligned with ours. He believes in a high energy, high intensity, attacking style of play. We want a clear identity, which we've had in the past. This makes my job a lot easier because I can recruit to it and the academy can play the same style. On our podcast, we've previously complained about what appeared to be a lack of structure or style of play under the Cowleys, but not everyone thinks style is important. To some, it's about just the results. So, we asked our Huddersfield Town panel that question. What do you see Huddersfield identity as, and do we need a style of play? Here's what they had to say.
A lot of clubs talk about having a particular way, and I think a lot of the time it's kind of nonsense, to be honest. But I think Town fans, I think, fell in love with sort of a high octane, high pressing system. And I mean, as have everyone. I mean, it's the trendy thing in football and has been over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. But, you know, they fell in love with that David Wagner way of doing things. But, I mean, it's not like Huddersfield have a long tradition of being a team that, you know, a club that strive to play attacking football or, you know, are particularly concerned with aesthetics. But at the same time, everyone likes to watch nice football, don't they? Like, you know, everyone wants attacking football. And I think, as I say, I think that was sort of the frustrating thing with Town was those games like Luton and Wigan where they had so much of the ball and just didn't do anything with it. There were plenty of other games like that earlier in the season as well, even before the break. And, you know, where they just looked sort of clueless in the final third. So I think people just want to feel like Town are going to score goals and that they're capable of scoring goals, because the issue they had last year is that if they went behind in a game or if things weren't going their way when it got to half time, you just felt like, well, they've lost this game now. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they didn't score first, you felt like we're not going to get anything out of this. And I think fans just want to feel like they can go 2 goals down and still feel like they can come back and win. And if Corberan can bring that, then that's going to make a huge difference.
To be perfectly honest, at the moment, I don't think we've got one. Like I just sort of said, we've moved around style quite dramatically, I'd say, over the last, you know, 2 to 5 seasons, certainly. I don't think we sometimes give it enough time. I think whoever's been involved in these decisions may expect results to happen faster than what they can actually do. So it'll take, you know, they're certainly on the new vision of bringing youth players through. If they're not readily available at the club at the moment, then you've got to look at, you know, that's going to take at least 2, 3, 4, even 5 years to fully implement from a first team all the way out, you know, right down to the under 17s and stuff like that. So you've got to have a little bit long-term vision rather than just an immediate effect. In saying that, first team football, you know, when David Wagner came in, it was clear in his first couple of games, Middlesbrough and Sheffield Wednesday, that there were a style of football that we were going to play. It was massively improved. I think we lost both games, but you could actually see something there. I think that was probably more down to, you know, either the quality of the players and certainly the lack of fitness to play that style of football. So if it comes in and we get off to a flying start in regards to performances, you know, then fantastic. Results may take a little bit longer to come through, but, you know, I think it is something that if we are going to try and embed it and make it a new culture at the club, then we do need to give it time, and it can't just be a quick 12, 18 month fix, and, you know, if it's not working, get rid of it and move on to somebody else and start again.
It obviously changes the identity with managers. David Wagner's style wasn't always great on the eye, but he won games, kept clean sheets. You know what I mean? There were certain games were fantastic, certain games were quite mind-numbing to watch, but they won these games. They kept it tight. They were last-minute winners. It was exciting in its own way. Obviously, Danny Nicky Cowley said they came in 1 point, 9 games. Said that quite a few times. Obviously, we heard that. I just felt you didn't really see what was going on enough. There wasn't enough of an imprint. There wasn't enough of combating other people's tactics as well. It was the Wigan game, first game back after the break. You could see what Wigan were going to do. We didn't adapt to it. Town didn't adapt to what was happening, and they got schooled by, you know what I mean? Yeah, a decent Wigan side, but I felt on the day things could have been changed. There wasn't a real, this is what we're doing, this is how we're playing. We're going to stick to it and stick to it and stick to it. Because I think if people remember, David Wagner's first few weeks, first couple of months, weren't fantastic, but everyone said we don't care because we can see what he's trying to do. We can see the way it's going to go. And you know what? It led to beating Manchester United in the Premier League. So if this goes the same way and he brings in a style of football that maybe we have to deal with, not the results, but we have the performances, and it takes a little while, then I think everyone will be happy.
I think you're right to say that Danny Cowley, Nicky Cowley never really implemented a style of football or gave Huddersfield Town an identity that we could hang our hat on or that we could be proud of. But I think it's probably a little bit unfair on them to kind of point the finger solely at their door. I think from my experience and having watched quite a bit of football, most clubs don't have an identity as such. Most clubs set up in a formation in a certain way and kind of will play, perhaps some clubs will play more long ball than others, but most clubs don't have a real kind of almost tangible identity that you can kind of articulate in a few sentences or draw out on a bit of paper. And I think to kind of level that at Danny and Nicky Cowley exclusively is a little bit unfair because, like I say, there's probably lots of clubs you could throw under that umbrella.
Does it have an identity? My word. Well, you know, I'm 45 now. I've seen a lot of Huddersfield Town versions of Huddersfield Town. A lot of them have been, you know, lump it forward to the big man, and sometimes that's worked quite well. And I think probably people outside of Huddersfield thought of us in that way until the David Wagner era, and it's not a massive thing to go back to that. But I think that was the thing with the Cowleys. They knew how to get results in some way. Now, you know, changing how you play week to week is okay if you're thinking about how the opposition is playing, but it's a naturally defensive or a naturally defeatist sort of way of playing, isn't it? It's a passive way of playing. You know, it's rather than imposing your will on the other team. And that's what we saw from David Wagner's side. So it'd be nice if, you know, we came, you know, Town went up to the Premier League. Nobody knew how we were going to play outside of the people who'd been watching us in the Championship. And we surprised everybody by the kind of football we were playing, though obviously people have got the hint with the David Wagner, Jurgen Klopp relationship, and people took it as being a certain way, you know, the gegenpressing and all that. God, do we have an ethos? God knows. But it would be nice to go back to something like that, something that actually was surprisingly pleasant. Let's go for that, surprisingly pleasant.
Again, I mean, it's partly because I'm an analyst. I can't get on board with the fact that they didn't have an identity under the Cowleys. I think they played a certain way. The 4-2-3-1 was the favoured system. The 4-3-3 was the backup. And it was pragmatic and it was football to win games by any means necessary, really. Now, I know that's not to everyone's taste. I completely understand that. But I think Huddersfield Town as a football club have a hang-up about the words working class and how that should, what that relates to on the pitch and how it should mean sort of an excess of hard work and Jonathan Hogg thundering into tackles and hard work and energy is important. But I think what Huddersfield Town really need in terms of an identity is they just need to get the fans back on board and start winning games. I don't think it has to be this sort of free-flowing, attractive, fluid style of football that I know everybody in the club is very, very hopeful of seeing under Corberan, and everybody who's been interviewed has said exactly the same sort of thing. They're playing the same system home and away. That, you know, Bromby said it'd be a 4-3-3, getting on the front foot, all this sort of thing. I mean, that's all lovely and that's great, but Town just need to win some football games again. It's been too long since they put together a really solid 15 to 20 game run where you felt really positive coming out of it. For Town, it's all about 3 games. How have we done in this 3 games? What's the next 3 games? Why have we lost these 3 games? And I think it's getting over that mental hurdle by just becoming a relatively safe, normal football club who wins some games, loses some games, draws others, that is really missing from Town at the moment, because it's been such a massive roller coaster ride. And the thing is, roller coasters are great for the 3 minutes you're on them, but you wouldn't want to live on them, would you, Matt?
Yeah, I think I do. I think it's still a tricky one. I think that what I would say about Town fans, myself included, is that Town fans like to see the high press and the tough tacklers. They like to see players like Lewis O'Brien and Jonathan Hogg, heart on the sleeve, flying into tackles, running around like little terriers, really. I think that there's a long history of that going back to, Darren Bullock, and I think, and even further. I think that players love Town fans love players that work hard. They love players who come through the academy. So I think that that's certainly something that they've started to look at more. I think that Lewis O'Brien probably encapsulates a lot of what Town fans love to see in Town players, really. I think that there is an ethos. I think it's always a tricky one, because by the same virtue, you could say that every club likes to see players who, fly into tackles and wear the heart on the sleeve and do everything for the team. Having said that, we are a working class town, and we like to see that reflected in the team. And as a fan, when you go, you want to see players who reflect your values as well. So I think that that's something that, arguably you could say Danny Cowley's went a certain amount of way to installing, but now it's a whole new regime, and it'll be interesting to see how that adjusts with Corberan. Really, I know that Bielsa's style is that high press and high intensity, and I think that if he can bring that, we've got the O'Briens and the Hoggs as well, and the younger players coming through, then there's a good chance that we can try and install a bit more of an ethos.
I think he will, a la Leeds United, Bielsa, it starts with defence. It'll be solid. They'll want to play football, because they know that's what the fans want. It's how you translate being really hard to beat without being defensive, if that makes sense. Bielsa's mastered that. His first couple of seasons at Leeds, they became hard to beat, but they couldn't get over the line. Well, this final season, they've been hard to beat, and they got over the line. So he's obviously progressed Leeds United, and I think that's what Corberan will do at Town. He will initially want to be very, very difficult team to beat, where suddenly you realise what the manager's all about. He's hard to beat. I'm guessing he'll want to be attacking, and you get the idea that flair will play a major part in his ethos of football. It's got to, just look at his background, you would like to think that his style of play will be full of flair. I think he'll be hard to beat, and the idea will be, assuming it's time, is progress and make the team a really exciting one to watch that attacks with flair.
Point 3. Develop players and use the academy. In August 2017, Huddersfield controversially restructured their academy. The recruitment model saw the academy start from the under-17 level rather than your typical under-9 level. The reasoning? The club felt it would help focus on older age groups who were closer to first-team football. That, and to choose a different strategy compared to another controversial one, the Elite Player Performance Plan. Huddersfield Town chairman Phil Hodgkinson gave his backing to the new setup on this very podcast in September 2019. He insisted that the club had several promising players on the books, players who could follow the success of academy graduates like Lewis O'Brien, Ryan Schofield and Matty Daly. It's worth noting that these 3 players were remnants of the old system, so they truly can't be classed as a success for the new academy setup. However, you can acknowledge that the change will have played some part. Town's new academy system, and Bromby, who is Town's former academy manager, want to create their own academy success stories, and they believe the appointment of Corberan will help this. Corberan does have a track record, after all, with Leeds, helping their under-23 players transition into the first team. To help Corberan and develop their players, Huddersfield made a change. On the 30th of July, Town replaced the elite development team with Huddersfield Town B. This is what the club had to say on their official website. Quote, "The first and perhaps most important change is the closeness that the B team will have with the first team. The squads will train alongside each other at the canal side day by day, ensuring that the young players have a full understanding of the senior squad's methods and playing style. If they are good enough to make the step up, being familiar with the training, personnel and requirements of Carlos and his staff should make the transition easier." Whether Corberan can deliver on all 3 points will be revealed in the fullness of time, and replacing the Cowleys with Corberan isn't without risk, as CEO Mark Devlin advised on the website. Quote, "There's a degree of risk with everything in football, and there is risk, but there will be some really exciting football that the fans will want to watch." When Huddersfield announced Corberan, a Danny Cowley interview in The Times with Henry Winter surfaced not long after. In the article, Danny is quoted as saying that he told Phil Hodgkinson that, quote, "You've made a mistake, and I'm going to look forward to proving you wrong." With the reputation of the Cowley still high and the risk of the Corberan appointment factored in, we asked our Huddersfield Town fan panel whether they do feel that Cowley's comments will come back to bite Phil Hodgkinson. Here's what they had to say.
It's one of them, innit? Only time will tell in that situation. From what we saw at Cowley at Huddersfield Town, for me personally, I don't think there were any sort of master tacticians. They seemed a little bit old school. I don't think they'll ever go on anywhere else and sort of revolutionise a football club, change its style, change its ethos. I'd class Danny Cowley and Nicky Cowley in a similar ilk to management style of someone more like Sean Dyche. Seems to, hard-working players, gets the job done. Not much flamboyancy within the side, but strong, effective, hard-working. They do come across as, lower league managers in that respect, I suppose, because when you're working with lesser ability players, that's kind of ethos that you've got to install into a side. But they're both young. They're still new to management. I think stepping up to the championship level will have done them the world of good. It's the highest level that they've managed at. They will have learned a lot in the time at Huddersfield Town. So yeah, I think only time will tell whether we'll come to regret getting rid of them.
I think that makes him sound like a bit of a dick, to be honest. But I think anybody who does that, who shakes your hand and says you're going to regret this, that's like the guy who dumps the woman. The woman dumps him, and then he says, he stands up and says, you're going to regret this, and then in a year's time she can't even remember his name. I think it doesn't reflect well on him, that, and I don't think he will come back to them. These seasons are they're not so long this year. But we've seen it before. If this goes terribly wrong, then by October, November, we can bring in a safe pair of hands. But at least we've given it a go. And I think, there's always going to be someone who says, if we could have stayed with them, if we could have stuck with them. But honestly, I didn't see this sort of bright, shining future under them. I think they did a great stabling job and sort of getting together that core group of players who were going to sort of fight for the cause and all that. But it's a kind of a lower league mentality, and if we want to be getting out of this division again, and obviously the ultimate aim has to be that, then you've got to move on.
I don't think such a misalignment at the top of the club, which seemingly there was, that there was ever a way forward for Danny and Nicky Cowley and Phil Hodgkinson and Lee Bromby as well, put into that kind of mould, to then move forward in a collaborative way that would have kind of kept everyone happy.
It depends what you mean by proving him wrong, because from people I've sort of spoken to at the club and close to the club, I think they have every expectation that the Cowleys are going to go on and do well elsewhere. And as I say, I think the feeling was that they would have done a decent job at Town, but it's just not the way that they wanted things to be done. So, yeah, I mean, I can see the Cowleys going on and doing really, really well and ended up being Premier League managers within the next few years. Again, it's no secret, and I think it's been obvious from my writing over the last, it is nearly 12 months, isn't it? 11 months, that, I've become a big fan of the Cowleys. I think, as I say, that West Brom game is a great example of the kind of them at their best, with the tactics and the game plan that they sprung in that game that no one saw coming. No one would have predicted that lineup, and it worked absolutely perfectly. Everyone did their jobs. They planned it in. They split the game into 4 quarters, and I think that the Cowleys were at the best when they had, or at least at Town, when they sort of had limited resources, and had to sort of be a bit clever and improvise and counteract the opposition. If you look at that 7-game run that they had, that unbeaten run when they first took over, like a lot of that was them being pragmatic. Like that Brentford game, it was like, basically, don't let them score and we'll see if we can get one late on. The Stoke game was the same, the first win they had, and there were other games like that. But I think where they struggled, and I think this is kind of what made Town's mind up. And by the way, we understand that they were looking at getting rid of the Cowleys sort of before the season even resumed. So this was something that was, a long time coming. I think there were a lot of games where if Town had to take the initiative in a game and you let them have the ball and let them play, they would really struggle. We did. Everyone's probably sick of this stat, but when I looked at it towards the end of the season, I think in the games where I think they'd had 10 games where they'd had 60% possession or more, and they'd taken 2 points from them, and they'd had like 10 games where they'd had 40% possession or less, and they'd taken 9 points or something like that. I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure on the 2 points. But yeah, and you get the idea, when they were on the back foot and they were playing counter-attacking and playing pragmatically and, trying to keep things tight, they were good. But when they had a lot of the ball and, were going on the attack and had to be creative, they struggled.
I think they'll go on. And I thought, like I say, my initial reaction was, why would you bring him in? Give him 6 months, with COVID in the back of the mind. Give him 6 months and then get rid. My feeling is that they will go off and have a good career somewhere else. But if it isn't with Phil, then with Phil Hodgkinson, then he makes the decisions, and he's going to do it he's going to do it for Town and for what how he thinks or how he feels Town will progress and go forward. He is the chairman, and you've got to respect him and his decisions. And on the face of it, I think the Cowleys will go off and have good careers elsewhere, and it should maybe have been at Town. But it isn't. The chairman's made a decision, and then suddenly when you get the appointment of the new manager, you suddenly think, he's looked at this, and he maybe thinks he's got something better.
I think it depends on your viewpoint. Weirdly, I saw a few people kicking off that he'd given an interview to the Times, but that's what a manager does when he's sacked, because it's very, very... You can curbishly your way out of this game very, very quickly. You can disappear out of people's thoughts and feelings. And I think first thing David Wagner did once he'd had a break after he resigned was do an interview with the Times as well. It's one of those things. And I think the nature of these interviews is they're after a soundbite. They want the one little anecdote, the thing that hasn't come out in any of the official statements. And I think the whole "proved you wrong" thing is a nice line, but I don't think it was said at the time or in the way it was portrayed in the article with that same sort of relevance. It wasn't a massive, I'm going to prove you wrong and turn around and walk out the door and all that sort of thing. I think it's just one of those lines that if you believe in yourself, as I know the Cowley Brothers do, if they're guilty of anything, it is an excess of belief, but I don't think that's a bad thing in a manager. Yeah, I think the Cowleys are going to do very, very well somewhere. I think they're probably going to end up in the Premier League. I think they will find the club who will commit to their vision and give them a bit of investment and give them time. But that still doesn't mean it proves anything wrong with Huddersfield Town. Success is achieved through different ways, and there are different levels of success. If the Cowleys went in at I don't know, say they went in at Norwich tomorrow, and who have already got a really good squad, have already made a load of signings and got them back into the Premier League. That's not necessarily success compared to, say, Carlos can come in, steady the ship, reshape the football club and get them in 3 years' time playing, some of the best football in the division and competing. That is a different level. So I don't put any stock in stuff like that, if I'm brutally honest.
I think it's got potential to. I think that the Cowleys are a sort of management team that need to have control at a club, and I think that was just something that Huddersfield weren't willing to relinquish, really. And I think that seems to be what's come down to why the sackings actually happened. I think that potentially could come back to bite Town and Phil. I think it'd just be the case of the Cowleys finding the right club now, really. I think it's easy to have a lot of control at lower down the football pyramid with Lincoln and, your Concord Rangers and your Braintree, but when it gets higher up the football ladder, I think that teams are not really willing to put that amount of trust, in terms of the recruitment and in terms of, the whole ethos of the club behind a management team. There's more of a sort of refocus towards foot directors of football, and I think we know from watching the Championship for a relatively short, even watching it for a relatively short amount of time, the amount of turnover of managers is huge, isn't it? And there's big expectations at a lot of the clubs. So I think it'd be tricky for them, but I think if they find the right club and they've got a chairman that'll sort of give them that bit more control and back them, then I won't be surprised to see them find themselves in the Premier League. But I still think it remains to be seen. I think that ultimately, they are very confident in their abilities, but they're still relatively untested at the higher levels. Obviously, this keeping us up aside, I think that they've still got a lot to prove, and I'm sure they will be more than eager to prove that. It's just a case of them finding the right job, really.
Obviously, that's showing how humble he is again. So, you know what? I don't care if it does. I just think at the time, I think the chairman's made the right decision for him in this moment in football, for Huddersfield Town Football Club. This club needed a clean break from everything, needed to start again, regroup and go again. The Cowleys work hard, the hard-working men. You know what I mean? Two young brothers who have obviously not actually played any sort of decent standard of football, but what they've done is they've dedicated their lives to becoming managers and being top managers. I hope they do get to where they want to be. I hope they get to the Premier League. I hope they get on, but I don't think it'd be proving Phil Hodgkinson wrong. I don't think that'd be the point. I think as it stands where we were, it was time to go. It was time to separate. The club was not going in the right direction. The family club, the way things were done, that great feel around Huddersfield Town was starting to disappear. It needed to change, and that's what they've done.
Chapter 3. So who is Carlos Corberan? We've heard about why the change in manager, but now we'll delve a little deeper into the man now in charge at Huddersfield Town, Carlos Corberan. But first, we asked Huddersfield Town fans what they knew about him before he was appointed. Here's what they had to say.
Nothing, in all honesty. I didn't know anything. I think we all know a little bit about Marcelo Bielsa, but I think we've got to be a little bit careful of realising that Carlos Corberan isn't Marcelo Bielsa. But I think, obviously, when he comes in, you do have a look into his background and what's gone on, and I think that it's good that he's got that Championship experience as an assistant to Bielsa, and obviously that'll have done him the world of good. We all know how much of a good coach Bielsa is and the job he's done at Leeds, although how much it sticks in your mouth as a Town fan. But I think that, I think it's a tough one, really. He's untested, really, largely in the head coach role at this level. Obviously, he's had other head coach roles, but they're at sort of, it's fair to say, significantly different level and a different sort of atmosphere in Cyprus and things. So I think, relatively untested. Be interesting to see how he puts his style across and how he sort of adjusts to the head coach role at Huddersfield, really.
Not very much, I must say. Not very much. I know he must be ridiculously intelligent and fantastic because he used to be a goalkeeper. So you know what I mean. So he must have known his onions straight away. For me, I just know him as someone that was already at Leeds United before Bielsa came in. He decided to keep him, bring him into the fold, and wanted to, you know what I mean, work with him. And they've got their success. And then obviously you dig into his past. We know that he's worked very close with Bielsa with young players. Danny Schofield's worked with him and knows what's going on as well. So it's exciting times.
Not much. I knew a few bits and bobs. A lot of it very positive. Cover your ears, Matt, but I have to cover Leeds a little bit during the season as well. So I have to do my research and I have to know a little bit about how they play and the structure of the club, etc. And he's been a vital link there. He's the man who's taken an awful lot of training sessions. He's been involved in all the myriad plotting and planning that Bielsa indulges himself in. And he has taken that under-23 team to success. The one thing I would say is that it's a very good under-23 team. There's some very good players in there. It's not like he's just sort of got a load of really rough diamonds and suddenly got them playing football. They're a really good youth side. I think the stuff I've heard and the stuff I know, I think is positive, but again, it's just a gamble. Nobody can really say a number two doesn't always make a great number one. But the early signs are positive. So let's focus on that.
Absolutely nothing, to be perfectly honest. I've never even heard of it. Obviously, since he's come in, I've done a little bit of research on him, but the actual name, could have been anybody really.
One of my mates used to be a coach at Leeds as well. So I spoke to one of them and they said, "What this guy's brilliant. This guy is top notch as a coach." So they've done the homework. They know that this guy's got a lot to bring to the club, and they're giving him a platform. Huddersfield's a huge club. They've given him a platform to prove himself. Listen, if he does well, he's only. We all know if he comes and does really well, he's probably on his way. But let's hope Town benefit in the meantime. Whilst we've got a guy of this ilk, then hopefully Town will benefit to the tune of maybe even challenging to get back in the Premier League. Who knows? I think it's an appointment that's to be applauded. It really is. Phil Hodgkinson will know that this guy's got a lot to offer. He's going to be ambitious. Now, it's can he achieve them ambitions at Town? And utopia. He gets Town back in the Premier League, does well, and sees it as a project and wants to stay. You never know in football.
If you'd have just told me the name, I probably wouldn't have recognised it, to be perfectly honest. I spend most of my time writing and thinking about Premier League football. So until quite recently, Leeds, I choose not to have Leeds on my agenda anyway. I don't like to think about them very much. But I'll have to think about them more. But I wouldn't have said that the name meant anything to me, to be honest. I probably shouldn't admit that, but I didn't recognise it. But as soon as I initially was told, sort of off the record, it was a Spanish guy, and I was happy with a Spanish guy, to be honest. I just thought a Spanish guy sounds great. It could be David Silva, it could be, and then when you start reading around it and you think it's that standard thing, isn't it? If he's trusted by Bielsa, you assume he's got something about him, and obviously the Leeds under-23s have done great. And it does give you that a little bit of optimism. Is it misplaced? Do you know what? I don't care, because optimism is great.
Not much, in truth. Having said that, I knew his name, which was more than what I can say about Jan Siver and perhaps David Wagner kind of before that. So in that sense, know more about him than some of our most recent managerial appointments. I've been involved with Leeds United for the last couple of seasons. I think he's been their under-23s coach, so in a similar role to what Danny Schofield does at our club currently. And I think he has some sort of kind of first team involvement as well as part of that setup.
No, practically nothing. Obviously it's a name that you sort of hear when you speak to colleagues at Leeds. But his name came up very quickly after the Cowleys were sacked. It was, within a few hours we that name sort of came our way, and we sort of started making investigations towards it. And then, obviously it was a swift appointment. It was that when they sacked the Cowleys, it said on the statement that they weren't looking for applicants. So we knew that they had, or were pretty confident they had someone in place already, because why else would you do that? So we were expecting it to be a swift appointment, particularly with the timing of it. It became apparent pretty much straight away that he wasn't going to be in charge for the Millwall game, but he sort of, was appointed within a week of the Cowleys getting sacked. So obviously we did our research, because we got his name quite early on, and he was genuinely seen as a long-term successor to Marcelo Bielsa at Leeds. A year or two down the line, when Bielsa moves on, they were looking at him to sort of take over in the Premier League. And I believe he did have a bit of a decision to make about whether he stayed at Leeds and held on and tried to sort of wait to see if that vacancy became available down the line, or whether he took the Huddersfield opportunity. And even before he took the job, we were sort of made aware through speaking to various people at the Leeds end that he did see it as an extremely attractive option, and a big step up for him to take charge of his own championship club was a really, really big deal for him, and it's obviously been a very enticing offer, because he's taken the job, and here he is.
Carlos Corberan has had an unusual path to become the head coach of Huddersfield Town. In his playing days, he was a goalkeeper in the academy of his hometown club, Valencia. But after only playing in the reserve team, he turned his hand to coaching. He studied a degree in sports science while taking his first coaching badges too. His first coaching spell was 6 years with Villarreal, first as a coach before becoming assistant manager after 3 years there. Corberan has been assistant to Manuel Pellegrini, who would go on to win the league title with Manchester City, and Ernesto Valverde, who won back-to-back La Liga titles for Barcelona. In 2012, Corberan's work had come to the attention of Pep Guardiola. Pep recommended Corberan to Saudi Arabian team Al Ittihad, and Carlos left to assist Raul Caneda in the Middle East. Together, they guided Al Ittihad to the semi-finals of the Asian Champions League. Corberan then linked up with legendary Italian defender Fabio Cannavaro, this time at Al Nassr FC. Cannavaro and Corberan has a nice ring, doesn't it? Together, they led the team to a runners-up finish in the Saudi Arabia Super Cup, had a good Asian Champions League run, and got to the final of the King's Cup. Then, after 2 unsuccessful stints as head coach for Cypriot sides Doxa and Ermis, he joined Leeds United. Now, we pick up the story courtesy of Oscar Marriott from All Leeds TV and Yorkshire Evening Post reporter Joe Urquhart to tell us a little bit more about his time with the Yorkshire club.
He emerged on Leeds United's radar through Ivan Bravo, who was on the board at the time, after Andrea Radrizzani's takeover at the club in 2017. So we're talking 3 years ago. And he linked up through Aspire and essentially came in as under-23s manager in 2017 to sort of help rebuild Leeds United's development squad, because it had been depleted by past ownership. There wasn't many players who were coming through. The academy had sort of been left alone and was quite separate from the first team. So the idea that Victor Orta had when he came in and arrived with Andrea Radrizzani, that's the sporting director for anyone who doesn't know, was the idea that they wanted to link up the under-23s to become a feeder team into the first team. And he essentially was tasked with managing that. They had an initial, when he first arrived at Leeds, they had a massive influx of players, sort of cheaper youth imports that have been released. So you're talking about like academies like Barcelona, people like that, where Victor Orta had lots of connections and contacts. And they had a huge influx just to fill out the squad initially. And then, so his initial start was very difficult, because obviously with the influx of trying to mix in sort of Spanish youth with Yorkshire youth was quite a challenging one, I think, initially, to try and get those two mixing. So the first 6 months weren't that great, but a lot of patience had to be required. And then after January, really, so you're talking into the start of early 2018, he's really started to impose his sort of ideas and philosophies on how we wanted to play football. And obviously it's at academy level, but I think coaches who can do that at any level are already onto a winner, you know, and they're going to be successful. And obviously working under Bielsa, who came in the year later, will stand him in good stead. But yeah, so just going back to that, he came in initially with sort of really unknown, and then a year later had sort of, because of the way that everything went under Paul Heckingbottom at first team level at the time, a lot of Leeds fans were looking at the under-23s because he basically, after January, you know, he plays a possession-based game. They play fast-paced football. He was bringing through the likes of Jamie Shackleton, who he'd promoted, Jack Clark, who's obviously now gone to Spurs. Those kind of players were coming through from scholars, and he'd had a big hand in promoting them and putting them into the development teams. We're bottom of the Professional Development League North, and 2 years later, we're champions of the country at Category 2 level. So he had a big impact in that. And obviously when Bielsa came in 2018, he then was into a dual role. So he was tasked with managing the development of the under-23s into the first team and implementing a similar style of play that Marcelo wanted. So it's been a whirlwind few years for him, I think, going from, obviously he got a lot of experience at Villarreal, went and did some different coaching methods, maybe you'd say, or different route that any coaches would say by going to Saudi Arabia and Cyprus. But he's certainly someone who had a very big impact in a very little amount of time at Leeds United. And the fact that he's now been recognised by Huddersfield Town, I think, is a big tip of the cap to him. I know that maybe some Huddersfield fans listening will possibly think that it's a bit of a left field move, but obviously this is his first seriously big head coach job on his own, and it'll be interesting to see how he goes. But he does have a lot of credentials if this is the way that Huddersfield are going to go forward. Yeah, the way that he sort of has managed that gap over the last 2 years since Bielsa came in has been vital for Bielsa, because as we've seen, when injuries hit, because the championship is such a slog, they've had to rely on players like Jamie Shackleton, who have emerged, like Jack Clark in his first season before he left the club, like you talk about Robbie Gotts, who was on the bench nearly 50 times before he got his debut, bless him. But you're talking about players who Bielsa has trusted Carlos to develop and push into the first team, and has no issues about that. And the way that they played before sort of fit ideally with Bielsa's style of play. Carlos believes himself in having the ball. You know, he's one of those where I think one of my favourite sound bites when I spoke to him was that pressure is a pleasure. That's what he used to say to me a lot. And I think he liked the pressure from Marcelo of implementing his style of play onto the under-23s, so that whenever the 23 squad were required to come into the first team, they were well drilled enough just to slot into the sort of machine that is Bielsa's first 11. You know, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you can do a job for Marcelo, he'll put you in there. But it has to be, they have to be well drilled and well trained, and that's been a huge part of Carlos's role. And it is a big loss. It doesn't matter how you dress it up. It's a big loss for Leeds United coaching, for Leeds United's coaching staff, no matter how you go about it.
I think he's a very, very promising manager. And to be fair, as a Leeds fan watching on, I was speaking to the rest of the All Leeds TV team, and we were saying that will we still watch the Championship? And to be fair, I will watch in envy and see what Corberan's able to do, because he deserves this opportunity. There's absolutely no doubt about it, because he's proven with his track record. You know, not to mention as well, the under-23s, he's won the Development League title for the under-23s. Not just won it, played absolutely glorious football at times. You know, I think we all joked that the under-23s were playing better football than the first team in some cases. And every single time an under-23 player has come from the under-23 team into the first team, it's been seamless. It's been absolutely seamless. They look like players who have played 50, 100 games, not like the first ever games in the first team, and they're like 18, 19 and that lot. It's crazy, really. And when you look at our bench, a lot this season, 5, 6 out of the 7 players have been players from the academy or players that are regular for the under-23s. And it's glorious to see, and, you know, and best of luck to Carlos in that regard.
Lee Bromby said that Carlos Corberan stood out because of how he wants to play, the immense detail behind his decisions, and how he wants to implement a fearless style of football, all of which can be passed down throughout the age groups. This involves using Corberan's highly flexible and fluid 4-3-3 formation, a possession-based style learnt from the top tiers of Spain. and then home just down the road. Again, Oscar and Joe jump in here to break down Corberan's tactics during his time at Ellen Road and why they were so successful.
It's very much 4-1-4-1 under Corberan. What Marcelo Bielsa always does is that he uses a sort of formation on the basis of how the other team sets up. So if you're setting up against a 4-4-2, he'll go for back three, because he always wants, with any Marcelo Bielsa team, there's always one extra centre-back to the other team as a striker. And to be fair, Corberan has very much taken on that kind of philosophy in the under-23 team. He's changed formation millions of times. From game to game, we can go for a back four and win 5-0 and then change the whole system based on how the other team sets up. It doesn't matter what previous results are, how the team's playing. He will adjust to what the opposition's doing. There will be strong opposition analysis going on, because even on the under-23s, he knew everything. He knew more about other teams on the 23s setups than what the actual first team managers of the respective teams themselves. That kind of sums it up for me, really. And yeah, I think obviously it's gone to the 4-1-4-1 first of all. It's a 4-1-4-1. The fullbacks very much push up. Under Carlos Corberan, it was very much Robbie Gotts and Clark Adair, who's gone to Barnsley actually, and got the winner that kept Barnsley up. He was actually starting out as a left back, a right-footed left back as well, who can play out wide. And to be fair, you might see a lot of your wingers go to fullback, because the difference between a fullback and a winger, there's not much difference, from Carlos Corberan's eyes, Marcelo Bielsa's eyes, really. It's both very kind of similar positions in that lot. And you might well see wingers go to fullback. We've seen Stuart Dallas go to fullback and transform our season, really. He was a traditional winger. He's gone to fullback, and that's happened with Carlos Corberan as well. So you might see a winger go to fullback on one of the slots. The two centre-backs tends to comprise of one massive centre-back. Not to go too technical into this, but one massive centre-back and one ball-playing centre-back. And then obviously the next position to talk about is the holding midfielder. Obviously the one of the 4-1-4-1, who's got a lot of responsibility in the team, a lot of responsibility. He's not just defending, he's responsible for building things up, because what you can expect under Carlos Corberan is possession-based football. Extremely. I think under obviously the Cowleys, kind of a bit more direct. But I think under Carlos Corberan, you're going to expect to see football. You're going to see football a bit like David Wagner in that first season in the Championship when he went up. You're going to see football. You're going to see proper football. What the holding midfielder has to do, he has to build up play. He's got a lot of the defensive responsibilities. He's protecting a front five, in effect, especially when it all gels together. So they've got that responsibility. I think obviously you then go on to the midfield four. You've got two wingers who drop quite deep, very much involved in the build-up. So it won't be too rare to see kind of your wingers in your own half a lot for most of the game. Will be in their own half and have to be very disciplined. And obviously the two centre mids, absolutely crucial as well. For us, it's been absolutely fantastic to watch Mateusz Klich and Pablo Hernandez. I think realistically, obviously Corberan isn't going to have that same kind of luxury of an option at the moment. Not to be arrogant in any stretch of the imagination, we're very lucky to have those two players. But it's crucial those two players control the game. The two centre mids ahead of the holding midfielder, they have to control the game and get a bit involved in the attacking moves as well. But yeah, they're very, very, very important. You've got two quality passers of the ball in those positions. So you're looking at that and you're thinking probably Lewis O'Brien is probably one of the favourites to play in that position, and possibly Smith Rowe alongside him if you get Smith Rowe back on loan again, and that could possibly work quite well. And then obviously the centre forward, the lone centre forward, is ready made for me if you keep him for Karlan Grant. But that depends if you keep him. It's ready made for Karlan Grant. I think he suits that role really well. Because for Corberan, we tended to play Ryan Edmondson in that position, but he's not quite stepped into the first team yet. The Bielsa has tended to be Kemal Roof, who's obviously gone, and Patrick Bamford. Patrick Bamford, I think every Championship fan's heard of. Some weeks he's the worst player ever. Other weeks he's like absolutely fantastic, and that's the fan perception of him. I think for me, I'm more generous in the praise of him. But to be fair, look, he misses chances. But I think the big thing with the lone centre forward is movement. Movement's absolutely crucial. Being able to hold the ball up, absolutely crucial again. pace and that lot, pace and strength, nice little bonuses. I think obviously Grant offers both of them. But yeah, I think that's in general what you can expect, a 4-1-4-1 or a very interesting 3-3-1-3. And that's when obviously the opposition go with 2 strikers up top, change to a 3-3-1-3. Again, sometimes you'll see in the back 3, you might see some crazy ideas such as playing fullbacks in the back 3 or you're holding midfielder in the back 3, but it works. It really does work. You know, the holding midfielder or the fullback going into the back 3, you know, they have that responsibility to cover the wide areas as such, and then obviously you still have your 2 centre-backs. So it still works in very much the same way, just a slight change of shape as such. So you're going to very much expect a number of things. You're going to have 1 holding midfielder and 1 striker. It's going to be built. The big thing you can expect from Corberan is football over results. The results might not come straight away, but he will stick to his principles.
He's definitely his own man. He was implementing a style, like sort of possession-based game before Marcelo even came onto the club's radar. So he likes that style of play. He was before Marcelo arrived, they were playing sort of very similar. I think there was a lot of 4-3-3, but with 2 wide wingers and 1 central striker. So he's probably more traditional sort of European style of coaching. Is that he wants the ball, he wants to play fast pace. He wasn't necessarily as high pressured on pressing teams as Marcelo is. I think that, you know, they did win the ball high up the pitch, but I think that was just a natural reaction to the fact that they were playing football that some academies just could not deal with. So I would say the high pressing is probably more Bielsa's style, whereas Carlos just wants possession-based game. It'll be quite slow for a little bit and then it'll speed up in the final third, for example. But he certainly wants the ball and he wants to impose his style of play on the game. He believes that if his side's dictating the game, then they've got a great chance of winning it. So I think possession-based and some attacking football is essentially what he'll bring to Huddersfield. Obviously, it'll depend on the players that he has to implement, but he got a lot out of young players. I know obviously Bielsa's credited a lot with developing these players over the last few years, but Carlos has to take a lot of credit, even in the season before, for bringing on the likes of Shackleton and Gotts and people like that, who are now in the first team, because he sort of really started that train rolling, really. So yeah, I think it'll be very similar to what you see Bielsa's fitness, because obviously unless you're fit enough in a certain weight, I'm not sure it'd be quite to the same details of Bielsa, where you're having to weigh in every morning and things like that, but you have to be super fit to play Carlos's sort of possession style game. I've talked a little bit about before, sort of it being a bit slow and then fast in the final third. So maybe that's because Bielsa ball is just full on running, constantly pressing high all the time. But I think no matter what, if you're in a possession-based team, you need to be fit because you need to make the runs. You need to be well drilled in your final third movements. So I expect Huddersfield will be well drilled in that regard. And I think like any professional footballer should be fit, but I think under Bielsa that they are astronomically fit and have been this season, and it's been a big impact that they've had. But Carlos with the under-23 was sort of already implementing that before Bielsa came in. I'm not sure if that helps answer your question, but I would expect that Huddersfield on the first day of the season will be an extremely fit football team. I imagine that, I mean, I don't know particularly in depth about Huddersfield's squad, but I imagine you will potentially see, similarly to what Bielsa has implemented at Leeds, a lot of players maybe tried and tested through pre-season in positions you maybe thought you might not see them, just because of the way that Carlos works, is that similar to Bielsa, he wants people to, whether in a natural spot or not, he might want them drilled in that position. They might never play there. I mean, I don't know how well Huddersfield Towns will know Matthias Klick, but in Bielsa's first pre-season game, he played centre-half, and that was a really weird thing to see because he's a naturally attacking midfielder. So, yeah, you'll probably see a lot of experiments initially when the competitive games, well, pre-season competitive games get going again. But yeah, that's probably something Carlos is you have to tip your hat to him, the way that he's developed a lot of these players. Jack Clark, like I say, he was drilled at left wing, but then played up front and scored a lot of goals at 23's level. So yeah, it's been, like I say, it's been a whirlwind for Carlos, but that is one thing that he's done very well is help develop players positionally. I think that you'd never think we're doing it. Robbie Gotts is similar, sort of the reverse of Jamie Shackleton. He came in and was a natural right back, now can play attacking midfield, and that's where he's played in the Championship. So it's definitely something that Carlos has up his sleeve and has demonstrated in the last couple of years at Leeds.
Carlos Corberan has seemed to attract praise almost everywhere he's been, including from the Huddersfield Town board. Even Marcelo Bielsa is full of praise. He said recently in an interview, quote, "Carlos is a good colleague. I have found that. He's very talented. I listen more to his opinion than I give mine to him." In the 2016-17 season, we saw a fresh-faced young coach implementing his ideas to an open-minded squad. But it's worth noting that David Wagner was paired with a recruitment-based head of football operations in Stuart Webber. Now, with the financial impact of COVID-19, outstanding debts that need to be cleared, and highly paid players that are proving hard to shift or motivate, Town are in a different situation. And maybe Corberan will not be given the same freedoms that David Wagner enjoyed. From what we've seen so far, Corberan will be tasked with promoting from within and improving current players. Bromby himself referred to this as a transitional period over 12 months, where players who were signed in the Premier League era are in the final years of their contract. From the looks of it, many will leave, and Town will look to replace them with players recruited for this specific model. All eyes will now firmly be fixed upon a recruitment team who, rightly or wrongly, don't have the most sparkling of reputations among the Town faithful. This is one area where Town will need to be at their best, just as they were in the days of the David Wagner revolution, and so far there have been signings, but it looks like more are needed. We finished this feature with our panel where we asked the question as to whether they have altered their initial feelings now that they have heard and seen more about the new coach, plus if they think the Corberan era will be successful and what will help and hinder him.
Well, young, hungry coaches still, both of them, both passionate, both want to take the club forward. I think the style of play we're going to see from Corberan is different than Cowley's. And if he can work with some of the players who haven't quite shown us their full potential over the last couple of seasons, maybe get a different tune out of them, play this different way of football, then I'm all happy.
It's a strange one, really, for me, because at the moment Huddersfield Town seem to be in yet another transitional period. We seem to go through managers really quickly now. It's probably just a modern day football thing in general, but certainly at Town we seem to move from one vision or ethos or style of play or style of club or whatever you want to call it. We seem to have jumped around a bit over the last sort of 5 years in regards to the vision of what the overall club wants to achieve. But personally, I thought, do we need someone a little bit more experienced to steady the ship? Obviously, you've not just got a lot of changes in regards to the football club, you've got a lot of changes in general with obviously all COVID-19 situation and stuff like that. If they want to go down a new path, then that's up to them. Carlos has come in. He seems to be in a link between the under-23s at Leeds and the first team, I think. So if we are wanting to promote from within, he's probably got experience in that field, which is good if that's what we're wanting to look down. How experienced he is as a first team coach, I don't know. Nobody knows because he's never done it from what I know. It's a bit of a turbulent time to be coming in. It could be a David Wagner effect. He were pretty unknown, or it could be another Jan Siever effect. He were unknown when he came in. Like I said, time will tell. I think it's a massive gamble from Phil. It'll either probably make or break his time at Town. I don't think he can afford to have another manager come in and only be there for 12 months. Unless there's an immediate improvement, I don't think fans will be overly patient given what's happened over the last sort of two and a half years.
Everything we've heard about him is very promising, and obviously Town have been convinced that he's the right man for the job. So we'll obviously know more, as I say, once we've had a chance to speak to him a bit and get an idea of what he's about, because that interview he did when he was first unveiled, it was a lot of the sort of the usual new manager plaudits, to be perfectly honest. I didn't think he came across badly at all. That's not to say that, he came across really well, but I think we'll sort of learn more about him once we get a chance to go into a couple of press conferences, and also the main thing is to see what they're going to be like on the pitch. So yeah, as I say, it's promising and it's exciting. It's again, we said earlier, Huddersfield Town not been boring, and I think I don't think they're going to be boring at all. at the start of this season. Whatever happens, but hopefully it's boring. It's exciting in all the right ways, rather than a roller coaster kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that there could only be that kind of appointment, really. I think that Huddersfield Town fans have got a little bit of a soft spot for relatively unknown, young, hungry managers after David Wagner. I think that it couldn't have been a sort of one of the older style British managers that are on the merry-go-round. So, yeah, I think that given the circumstances, that could be the only type of appointment that'd be possible. I think Town fans would be probably a bit happier to know that he's got a bit more experience in the Championship with Leeds, because I think there's a tendency to pigeonhole certain people. I think that, I think Town fans want to make sure he's more like David Wagner and less like Iain, to be honest. I think that'll be, unfortunately, that'll be what Corberan has to live or die by, really.
I think in terms of replacement, I think Carlos Corberan is part of a whole. What Town aren't replacing the Cowley Brothers with Carlos Corberan. Town are replacing the Cowley Brothers with a complete philosophy, a complete change of everything, barring the recruitment department. So it's difficult to sort of make a like-for-like comparison, because I think if Carlos Corberan is if it all goes wrong and he loses 15 out the first 20 or something like that, I still get the impression, and I still believe, that Town are committed to this philosophy and this change. This is what this whole move is about. So it's in terms of the like for like individuals, I just don't think there's any comparison, really.
Yeah. I mean, he's coached with the best. He's watched the best coach players. He's watched the best have success. He can only have, even if he's half clued up, he can only have learned good things. And now he's got a chance to be the top man, to instill what he's learned in his career so far, and bring it all to Town. And like I say, Town could be the massive benefactors of this.
Yeah, I'm excited by it. As I kind of said before, as a fan, you pay your money to watch your football team win, but you want to see your team play well, attack, score goals, bring some excitement. I think we've had a positive goal difference, I think once since 2012, which as a fan isn't very exciting in truth. So I'd like to think with kind of Carlos coming in, we'll play that more attacking style of football. We'll look to win games. We'll look to have some shots on goal. We'll score some goals. And that's, as a fan, that's what you pay your money for and what you want to see ultimately. So that excites me.
I feel fine about it, to be honest. I'm not a great sentimentalist about these things anyway. And the more you hear about what the Cowleys, how much control the Cowleys wanted, and that doesn't fit in with this sort of modern version of a football club. Most football clubs are going towards this thing of not having a manager, but having some sort of football directors and then coaches, which can then be replaced relatively easily. And that does sort of insure you against those kind of massive lurches between managers, where everyone wants to bring in their own players. And if you have an overall setup and then the coach, I think that's far more healthy in 2020. Take note, Man United.
I think it's impossible to say. I'd love to sit here and sort of be completely effusive and say he's definitely going to make a massive change and I think it's going to be all right. But it's changing a football club. A football club is the turning circle of a cruise liner, not a Lamborghini. So it takes time, it takes patience, it takes investment, it takes a lot of luck as well. And it's the whole combination of those things that come together to make the whole. I think Town's recruitment has to be better. I'm not going to go into naming individuals or anything, but Town have to make some key signings and they have to be successful. And there is so much at stake here in changing the whole identity, philosophy and statement behind a football club. I am completely behind Huddersfield doing it, but to just say it's going to be an outright success, or it's impossible to say. The one thing they do need to do is be patient. If you're committing to this across all levels of that football club, you have to be patient, because what you can't do is have all these people saying how they're going to play and how they're really excited and how Carlos is bringing something different, and then 10 games into the season, if it's not going right, panic and push the button. It could get worse before it gets better. But yeah, it's just so difficult to say, Matt, because nobody knows. I would predict that, I think, as I said, it could be a bit bumpy early on as players adapt and adjust. But ultimately, it just comes down to recruitment. It comes down to what that Town squad looks like come, November the 1st.
Absolutely. I think, obviously, as I said before, a lot depends on what happens above him as well. He needs players who we can coach, we can get the best out of. It's not just going to be about him himself. He's going to need the resources to work with. But yeah, I think, obviously, a lot depends in terms of who you do bring in. But if you do give him the right tools to the job, you give him the long term, you're not just, say, for example, obviously you have gone through quite a few managers in the last 2 or 3 years. He does need time. He will need time. We've seen it with the under-23s. It didn't quite gel results-wise straight away. The football was there. The football's always there under Carlos Corberan, but it might take time for the results to happen, because when you're changing your approach so drastically, because Cowley's at one end of the scale, Carlos Corberan's the totally other end of the scale. Cowley's, it's results first. The football's not necessarily particularly great from what I've seen. A lot of Huddersfield fans I know have said the same kind of thing. But Carlos Corberan is the total opposite, really. So you might not see the results straight away, but you will be entertained, no matter what, I think. I'm almost certain of that. And yeah, I think, obviously, you need a lot. There will be a lot you need. You need ball-playing centre-backs. You need a lot of players that can fit in with this style of football. You might need a squad overhaul. It might take more than one season. We've seen so many times at this level, patience and loyalty is not often there. It's not often there. We've seen a lot of surprise sackings this season in any league, really. But I think the Championship especially, we've seen a lot of that. And look, it might not work out well. I always thought Pep Clotet would make a decent head coach. Obviously when he left us to go to Oxford and then Birmingham, it's not quite worked out for him. But I look at Carlos Corberan and think he's another step above for me. He's got a clear passing of play. He can coach all different phases of the play. We've seen it with the under-23s. It's just whether he can make those slight little adjustments from the under-23s into a first-team head coach. Because it is very different, isn't it? You've gone from coaching 19, 20-year-old lads to coaching potentially 25, 26, 27, 28-year-old lads who have experienced stuff in football and more difficult to get on board. So, yeah, there's going to be that element of it, but I've seen no reason why Carlos can't be a success. I've seen no reason why he can't be a success. I really do look forward to seeing Huddersfield play. I think that's probably really be the one kind of game I'm going to really take notice of in the Championship. And yeah, I just hope the ball doesn't let him down. That's the big thing. I've seen a lot of people leave Leeds and the ball's let them down. I just hope that's not the case.
I mean, you can only hope his tenure will be successful. How you gauge success, I'm not sure. I mean, his first season, I would like to think, unless he starts off with a bang and really gets Town up into the top echelons of the table, even now as a Town fan, I'm just thinking avoid what we had this season. Mm-hmm. Become a team that isn't looking over the shoulders, in January, and see what happens from them. Because between January and sort of May, anything can. If you're in with a shout, anything can happen in that league. It's one of those leagues. It's a tough league, but if you're still in there, 9th or 10th come January, and winter sorts the boys out, you never know what's going to happen. So I'm hoping he's going to be successful. The things that might stop him, I think initially, he'll need the fans on side, because the fans have had a rough deal for the last 2 or 3 seasons. You know, it's not been good to watch. It's been a hard thing to go through from a club that had under Wagner so much success and excitement. You know, it was the place to be. It was buzzing, and then the downside of that has been the last couple of seasons where it hasn't been good to watch. The results have been nigh on terrible, really, and they came close to relegation, you know, this last season. So I would think my thing would be to Town fans, get behind the team, get behind the manager. Even there'll be players there that some Town fans will feel shouldn't be there. Well, let's give this manager a chance to improve them and see if he can get more out of them than the previous managers could, and see where he takes them. But he'll need the support. I can speak from experience here. When the Town fans get behind you, it gives you another, I don't know, a lot of percentage more belief in your own abilities, and the noise they can make the difference. So he needs that. He needs that from the off. He needs that for the next 6 or 7, 8 months. That would be the only thing if the fans turned early. So I think back to your question there, what could go against them? If the fans have had enough, and it's suddenly things aren't looking like they're on the up, fans can turn. Can happen at every club.
Yeah, so I think that I'm really hopeful it will be. I think that, you know, we've got. I think the young players coming through do bring a lot of promise. I think that I'm still very wary. I'm still quite cynical, I think, in terms of needing to bring through transfers, to be honest. I know that a lot of other clubs haven't done it just yet, given the whole COVID situation and the longer transfer window. We've got Danny Ward in, but I think that, I know he's a different player to that which left Huddersfield, but I think it's a bit of an uninspiring signing, to be honest. I mean, it might be a clever one down the line, but I think we do need to see a bit more to excite the fans in that regard, to be honest. And I don't think we can put too much stock in the younger players, but it is good to see them coming through, and it's good to see that, you know, Carlos Corberan is a manager that will bring young players through. So I'm really hopeful it'll be successful. I think it's a difficult environment for him to work in. It's a really hard one to call, to be honest, but I think we are hopeful, but I think we just do need to get a few more through the door, and you know, I think his hardest challenge is to what to do with the sort of players who we've had trouble with, you know, ever since we got relegated from the Premier League, really. Your Benzas, your Diakabis, I know it's been mentioned on the podcast a lot, and your Congolos. I think now he's not shifting them on, he's got to get the best out of them, and I think that'll be his biggest challenge in my view, and motivating them. With obviously, so as a fan, you don't know where their heads are at the moment, but you know, it remains to be seen. I'm hopeful because of his background, and you know, it's an exciting new start, really. But I think that, you know, he really does have a job on his hands. That's what I'd say.
I mean, it's always hard to say whether a manager's going to be successful. As I say, I think if they back him and based on his credentials, there's no reason that he can't be at all. And if he is, you know, as good a coach and as good a head coach as Leeds obviously felt that he was, then yeah, I mean, he'll be a success. But obviously, you know, he is still a bit of an unknown quantity. You know, it's the first time that he's managed in England on his own. So in that regard, it's, you know, there's not a huge amount of, it's not like if you appointed, you know, Neil Warnock, you'd be like, oh yeah, they'll be fine next year. Do you know what I mean? But again, Town don't want Neil Warnock. They don't want to play that kind of football. So it's just, I think this season is a really odd season as well, just because of obviously the circumstances around, you know, the lockdown, the fact that games are still going to be behind closed doors, at least to begin with, by the looks of things. The fact that the transfer market is so stagnant, the fact that the window is going to be open until October. You know, it's still extremely unusual circumstances. And I think we saw sort of after the break that there were certain clubs and certain teams that adapted well to the conditions behind closed doors, and there were certain clubs that didn't. Town were one of them. They certainly weren't the worst, but they certainly didn't do well behind closed doors. And there is going to be an element of that again, I think, at the start of the new season. And I think that is very difficult to predict. And as I say, the transfer market is a massive thing as well, because, you know, that we've started to see a bit of movement over the last sort of week or so as we record. But there are still half a dozen sides that haven't made a signing yet. Most clubs have made none or one signings. There's not many clubs that have made multiple. I think the only clubs that have been like really, really busy have been Norwich and Coventry. And Coventry obviously had a massive head start because they knew they were going to be in the Championship way before, you know, they were way before pretty much anyone else in the division. Everyone else was either, you know, in the Premier League batting relegation, or in the League One playoffs, or were fighting relegation in the Championship, or hoping to get promoted from the Championship. So they were, you know, them and Rotherham were the first teams that sort of knew for sure that they'd be in the Championship next season. So they've sort of, Coventry have sort of stolen a march in that respect. And obviously Norwich have held on to a lot of their Premier League money, and, you know, they've not splurged it all at once like Aston Villa did last summer. And they've obviously had a bit in the pot to make some signings this summer. So, but those are the only two really. So it will be interesting, I think, to see. It's always interesting when you go into the start of a Championship season to see how it's going to shake out. But I think doubly so this year.
No, I know it's a difficult one, because obviously this is his first job and things will be thrown up for him that he'll never have dealt with before. But I think a lot of experience that he will have gained from being on the coaching staff at Villarreal and working under Marcelo Bielsa will stand him in good stead. I think it's just dealing with the pressure of being a first-team manager and it being all on you. You know, when you go through bad spells and fans are starting to question bits and pieces about what you're doing, how he stands up to that, it'll be interesting. But I honestly think the way that he believes in his coaching philosophy, you know, he won't go away from that. He'll stand by it. And Huddersfield have obviously identified him as someone that they want for this sort of re-energisation of the team, I guess. And that is, you know, I honestly think he can be successful, but it might just take some time. And whether Huddersfield are willing to buy into that, it seems like they will be, because you don't go after Carlos for overnight success. He wants to develop players and he'll want to bring teams on. So it might take a little while, but it'll just be whether they stick with him long enough for him to do that. I should hope so, the way that they've gone about sort of identifying him very quickly and bringing him in to replace the Cowley brothers. But I definitely think, you know, it's not just he's saying it because he's brought success to Leeds United, but I think his track record, the way that he's come about it, he deserves this opportunity to show that he can be a first-team manager somewhere. Huddersfield are the team that's taken the punt on him, and I think he'll take a bit of time, but I think he can be a success. It'll be interesting, I'd say, from a Leeds United point of view, he's worked wonders with the academy here. So it'll be interesting to see how he implements that over at Huddersfield and whether he can bring success to the first team in a similar way, because obviously the way that Huddersfield were operating before was probably trying to bring in a bit more money-heavy signings, and now you're going sort of the opposite model. So in that regard, he is, honestly, I can't speak highly enough of him being an ideal fit for that sort of model, but it's just whether the scouting system is strong enough and whether he can implement his ideas quickly enough because the Championship's an unforgiving league. We all know that it's an unforgiving league, and at the end of the day, results are key and paramount to managers keeping their job. So it'll just be interesting to see how the pressure of first team management goes with him. I honestly think he's got the experience to do it. Regardless of it being at Championship level, he's proven in the past, you know, he's got that. So yeah, I wish him all the best, like I say, and Leeds fans generally wish him all the best as well. It will be quite interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it develops, and I wish him the best of luck because he's such a lovely lad, and the way that he speaks about the game, he's so passionate, and like I say, he's one of the hardest working football coaches I've ever spoken to and seen. That he deserves to bring success to someone, and obviously Huddersfield are taking a punt, so I honestly hope he gets rewarded.
I think the Corberan era has got the potential to be successful. as I said previously, knowing the very little I do know, but knowing that he's been involved in Leeds United, where they've played quite a good brand of football, knowing that he'll probably try to give us more of an identity and kind of play a certain type of football than perhaps what we've seen previously. Being optimistic that we'll play a nice, good attacking brand of football. I want him to do well, and I think he will do well. The things that could hold him back, the things that kind of, I guess, could hold the majority of managers kind of in the football pyramid back, really. And one will be time, and ultimately how long Lee Bromby, Phil Hodgkinson perhaps prepared to give Carlos to implement his ideas and kind of deliver some results. Obviously, kind of coming to last season, Phil wanted to give Jan some time, and he did do so. This is a slightly different scenario, and Carlos is very much his man. But if we're in a similar situation, 8-9 games into the season, it'd be interesting to see if he reacts similarly or differently. I think Carlos probably inherits a squad that's imbalanced, if we're being truthful, that's slightly ageing in certain areas, particularly at centre-half, I think, where you've kind of got Tommy Elphick, Richard Stearman and Schindler now all 13 above, and Romani Edmonds-Green arguably a little bit too young to kind of play week in, week out at a championship level. So I think there needs to be a rotation of players in and out. There'll be some in that current crop who are on very high wages who will need to move on. I'm not sure how easy it will be to move those out in the current climate. And similarly, to bring in players, I think kind of given the proximity where we are now, mid-August to when the season starts, there's quite a lot of work to do both on the training field and off it. So he's going to be a busy man, that's for sure. But I think the fans will be quite supportive of him, and I think kind of the majority of people will be prepared to give him kind of the test of time and will be kind of excited by his appointment. So yeah, wish him the best, and we will look forward to what's kind of to come on the pitch, really.
Will it be successful? Lord knows. I really hope it will. I'm hoping for that little bit of stardust, that sprinkle of something different. Quite often with managerial changes, it's all about a lurch. You go from something to something, something to something completely different. And most clubs do that all the time. And the one mistake Town made was not doing that when they went for Jan Sievert. They thought they were going to get the same thing again, the carbon copy, and they didn't get it. So they're going a different direction. I like the different direction. I like going in a different direction, and obviously that direction seems to be more linear than the one before. Will he be successful? Oh God, I hope so. I would say, yeah, I think so. I'm mildly optimistic about it. I think success probably would mean sort of a playoff push at this stage. No one's expecting us to walk away with the championship, but being in and around the top 10, or being in and around, I hate that. Being in the top 10 would be great. What's going to help and hinder him? I like the noises coming out about getting those players who were sort of pushed aside by the Cowleys back on board. If we can get if we can get Terence Congolo whatever playing to the levels that we know he can play at, and those like 77 wingers that we've got that are not quite good enough, if we can get one or two of them to look half decent, that would be great. The Cowleys did a great job of talking about togetherness and being, all in the same cause. Well, actually, that'll only take you so far. So what would help them is to get that sort of playing style through them, and to get, I'm not one of these people who sees the links with Leeds players and thinks, oh my God, no, bring in those players who've been taught to play like that, because it's great football. What's going to hinder him? Just that. The sense of the last 2 years of just sort of grind and grudge and, everything that made it impossible almost for Jan Sievert, and then made it very difficult for the Cowleys, of that feeling of everyone's kind of done 2.5 years or whatever it is now, what feels like terrible drudgery. I think that will hinder them. So it's kind of, and also there isn't a summer enough to turn that round, is there? And if you're going to change a whole ethos and a whole way of playing, you usually need a pre-season. Now, there's nothing like a pre-season this year, isn't it? It's probably not the year to be sort of lurching into a sort of different style of football.
Again, it's sort of get your crystal ball out in it and have a look and what might happen in future. You know, it could go either one of the two ways. It could absolutely be fantastic, and we could end up like Brentford and sort of being that sort of club, or it could go totally wrong and all we've done is put a manager in place as Iain Sievert who's not ready for this level of football. Personally, looking at it now, our squad stands as of today. We're 13th of August. Don't really have many expectations for next season. I think we'll probably be down as it stands in bottom six and fighting for survival. We've got some players who've been with us long term. Your Mbenzas, your Diakabis, Congolos, them sort of players. Are they going to feature? We don't know. Are we still trying to get rid of them? We've got a couple of decent players in Carl Grant and Lewis O'Brien. Are they going to stick with us? Are they not? If those five leave, we free up money to bring in some decent players maybe. But I think we need a good mix of experience and new players coming through. Again, his most successful period in recent history under Wagner, we had players like Dean Whitehead, Mark Hudson, Chris Lerver, Schindler, Aaron Moore. They were kind of like the older heads in the team, and we sort of filled in around with players like Izzy Brown on loan, Casey Palmer. We had Phil Billing was still his young player, Naki Wells. Could argue his experience, but still young player. So I think we need to bring in a good mix. You can't have a team full of 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds because it's very inexperienced. Although I'm sure Man United back in early 90s would argue with that one. But I mean, for me, I think it needs to be a good mix. How good are the kids coming through? We don't know much about them. I personally don't follow youth teams, so I'm not sure. I think Carlos has got a very uphill battle. You've asked, what might help him. At the moment, I can't really see much that'll help him. I think the thing that will hinder him overall is, we've had two and a half seasons now. Even when we survived in Premier League, we were losing back end of season mostly. We've not seen any decent football for a couple of seasons. We've tried, but not really worked out. Fans, how patient are they going to be? Behind closed doors, that could be. I suppose that's one that could go either way. It could be an hindrance in the fact that there's no new manager bounce that fans can get behind. On the other side of the coin, there's no one there to shout or scream abuse either. So depending on how we're playing, that will either help or hinder him. But obviously, I wish him all the best. He looks like a young lad coming in and trying to find his feet within first team football. So yeah, wish him all the best. But I do think it's his first management job. It's a tough one for him.
If he's not, I hope nobody rewinds this interview that we're doing tonight, because I think he is. I think he is going to be successful. It's going to be the playing side of it. I think the way the world is now financially, the way I think football clubs are right now, I think it's going to be even tougher than it already is for a young manager and the young coaches that he's brought in with him. But I'd like to think he's going to work with what he's got. If he can get the chairman just to give him a few additions and he can bring the kind of high-paced football he wants. Let's not forget, there's players in that squad. Brian's. You've got Toffolo there, full energy. He'll run all day for you. There's people within this squad now with a few additions that can help the coach get to where he wants to be. I think a little bit more patience, I think, than we've seen for a while. If we can see in those first, even in the pre-season games, which I don't know if we're going to be privy, I don't know if there's going to be any sort of coverage of those. I'm not quite sure. But in those first few games, if we can see an improvement in the pace of the game and crosses into the box, shots on target, driving forward, that number 9 being used properly as a centre forward, and I just want us to be patient, try and enjoy the ride a little bit. If we get to Christmas, there's no results, the style's not changed, then then we start asking massive questions of the chairman as well as the coach. I don't think that's going to be what's going to happen. I think we're going to have a lot more smiles on our faces. I think we're going to see a lot more attacking football, goalkeepers being worked more. And I just hope that, Corberan is a coach that has a philosophy that he sticks to, and is a strong enough character as a young man to be able to carry that through.
There's a team that is dear to its followers. The colours are bright blue and white. They're a team of renown, they're the pride of the town, and the game of football is their delight. And all the while upon the field of play, thousands loudly cheer them on the way. Often you can hear them say, who can beat the town today? And then the bells will ring so merrily, and every goal shall be a memory. So town, play up and bring that cup back to Huddersfield. So town, play up and bring the cup back to Huddersfield.